This is Mark Karadimos, and today I'd like to talk to you about human population and environmental impact. I get into this discussion with people all the time about climate change, about what we could do to make our world a better place. And I always insist that this conversation also include human population. So that's why I want to make this video, is to describe what I mean by how to include the discussion of human population within the greater framework of the environment. Okay, first, let's talk about definitions. First of all, I think humans should live in harmony with nature. I don't think this is an obscure concept. I think what I mean by that is to find balance with the environment, which includes other plants and animals. Once we live outside that balance, things happen. We lose species. We damage rainforests. Bad things happen when we live outside that harmony. So when we seek a harmony, we benefit by it. We keep species of animals and plants around that could possibly benefit us in the long run. Who knows, we could find possibly a cure for some disease by using some plant bark. Who knows, right? So it's to our best interest, of course, to live in harmony with other creatures and other plants, other insects, and so forth. All right, this is going to be part 2. We're going to talk about population growth. I've got a graph that will describe population growth over time. So if you take a look at this, you'll see that population has looked like it's remained fairly low over time, and then once you hit basically modern civilizations hitting somewhere around here, we're kind of becoming more and more advanced, and due to advances in medicine, we live longer and die less, okay, and that's what leads to this population explosion. Okay, so population is exploding, and this graph is called exponential growth graph, and it definitely has that characteristic where it looks like it remains low, kind of increasing, but it's low, and then it explodes, which is definitely the characteristic of that mathematical shape called exponential growth. Just in the it looks like about 1,000 years, we've jumped from less than 1 billion, maybe even half billion, to as high right now. We're talking right now in 2014 to be around just slightly over 7 billion. So the increase, dramatic, very dramatic to say the least. Okay, I have another graph we could take a look at that will flesh out another point. Okay, this graph will show us how human population has changed over the years and where it's headed. So right now it looks like this is actual. The blue and black are actual population values, and we're actually above the 7 billion mark. So we're actually just slightly over it here in 2014. Now, depending on who you believe and what mathematics you use will describe where human population is headed. On low estimates, we're going to curve out and max out about 8 billion. Sometime in the future, looks like less than 100 years from now, and then it may go down. Who knows? Of course, this is all according to the UN. Now, moderate UN numbers say that it will increase, but gradually it'll start to slow down, but it looks like it'll hover at about 10 billion. Okay, and then of course there's upper end UN numbers that say that if population is not under control globally, it's just going to keep skyrocketing up. Is this exponential? It doesn't quite look exponential, but it has the same characteristic explosive shape. It almost looks like it's linear at this point. Hard to tell, but no one would argue that if you were to talk about this red value or red possibility is outrageous, because in the year 2100, we're looking at a possibility of being somewhere around 16 billion. Okay, 16 billion on the upper end, 10 billion being more conservative, and at the low end in the year 2100, we're talking about maybe even back to 6 billion if a miracle occurs. Okay, that's the mathematics of a miracle. Okay, but I would say that we're at least looking at a 10 to somehow 16 billion. I think these are probably more realistic numbers if things don't change. This would be, if you grasp the notion and you swallow the notion that human impact upon nature as we grow in number is a problem, then this would be the solution to lower our numbers, lower human population numbers. Therefore, we would lower our impact on the environment. Okay, so this would be something that would be beneficial if you take on that view. And this is something that requires some need, and this is danger. This is outright danger. Okay. All right, so I think this graph says a lot. Okay, this is part 3. We're going to talk about the mathematics of our impact, human impact, on the environment. Okay, first got to discuss some assumptions here. Well, first of all, if we have one human, we could say that each human on the planet has a certain impact. I'm going to call that impact I. I'm going to quantify it as I. Okay, so now the impact I'm referring to means how much carbon emissions this person has, how much space he takes up, how he encroaches upon animals, how this person basically impacts his environment on all possible levels. As far as I know, I don't think anyone's ever quantified that, but there has to be some measurement to describe how much the average human can impact his or her environment. Okay, so you would take the total impact divided by the number of people, and that's how you'd come up with. Okay, how we would quantify it, who knows? A whole other discussion for a whole other time. But let's say every human on this planet has some impact on the environment, and I'm going to say I is that average amount. All right, so in the year 1980s, I would say somewhere in the 1980s, we reached 6 billion. There's 6 billion humans. Okay, that means that if each of these humans has an impact I, okay, for every one human, I have to have an impact of I. That means there's going to be 6 billion I. 6 billion I would be then the measure of total human impact on the environment, whatever it is. Okay? Well, we know that now at least when this video is being made in the year 2014, we are now over 7 billion people on the planet. So 34, 35, almost 30, about 30 years ago, or 30 years have passed, and we've gained 1 billion humans. Okay, so what does that mean? If we've got 7 billion humans, and each of them has an impact of I, we've got 7 billion I. That would be the measure of total human impact on the environment. All right, so in the year 2100, the UN estimates we're going to have somewhere around 10 billion. As a matter of fact, the upper region of their mean is somewhere around 12 billion people. Okay. All right. Now, of course, this is a debatable idea in itself, which I'll discuss in a moment, but that would mean that there's going to be, if things don't change, if we continue with the same impact on our environment, humans remain exactly the way they are, they don't change behavior, there's going to be 12 billion impact. Okay, that means we're going to have more impact than the 2014. And in 2014, there was only 7 billion impact. But in 2100, that means there's going to be, what would that be? 5 billion impact more. So that's, that's a considerable amount of increase of impact on the environment. And they're going to say, wow, something needs to be done. So obviously we can't have that amount of impact on the environment. So that's where environmentalist people who are environmental happy, which all of us should be, they say, well, we're not going to be the same. We're not going to be the same, and our impact, of course, over time is going to shrink because technology is going to be better. As a matter of fact, right now, we have changed our ways, and some people say that we actually do use less. We have less of impact on the environment. They say that we actually have reduced our impact, let's say, by 30%. I don't know how. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute, but let's say that's correct. Let's say we do. From right now, we lower our impact. We all become environmentally conscious, and we all lower our impact on the environment by 30%. Okay, so if we lower it by 30%, then we're only going to use 70%. Okay, lower. So instead of the 100% we're using now, we'll lower it by 30, so we'll use 70%. So if I multiply this by 70%, in other words, 0.7, 12 billion times 0.7, I get 8.4 billion. And that would be the impact. 8.4 billion I. And this is where people on the left say, see, we lowered our consumption by making smart choices, by whatever means, light bulbs, special type of cars that are no longer internal combustion, whatever ways they consider it to be a gain, which are all debatable in themselves, but let's just say we do. And they say, see, we're not going to consume 12 billion. We've lowered our impact on the environment, and now in the future we're only going to use 8.4 billion. See, there's a gain. We're making progress. And I say, no, we're not making progress. And this is why we need to talk about human population, because when human population grows, even with the slight changes we make to our lifestyle, assuming that those do make a positive impact, we've actually increased our output, or our impact, that is. Instead of it being 7 billion, we get 8.4, so it looks like we've gone up 1.4 billion impact on the environment. So there is no gain, unless you're talking about reducing it from the ridiculous. We've come down in that sense. But my point is that without talking about human population growth and finding some management process to lower that growth process, then that 7 billion is going to become 8.4 billion no matter what you do. In other words, there's going to be a gain. There's always going to be an impact increase on the environment, despite what little attempts we make on changing our behavior. That human population in itself is an issue that needs to be discussed because it does increase our impact on the environment. Okay, so that needed to be said. But I have other graphs that we should take a look at, and we'll take a look at that in our next section. Okay, in our next part, we're going to talk about energy consumption. So let's talk about energy consumption, and I actually have a map here a graph here to look at. Of course, this is energy usage in the United States, in just the United States. So the United States is, of course, not isolated in this, and that Europe and other more advanced countries follow the same pattern, and that you could see that we're using more electricity over time, we're using more transportation over time. There's a variety of areas that were being used as far as energy, and it seems to be going up. I mean, just think about cell phones. We got to charge them. We've talked about flat screen TVs, just electronics in general. we're using a lot more, we're getting and shipping more things because we have more people, right? The more people there are, the more products that need to be shipped. So when you look at human population drives part of this. And the other part is that advancements in technology are increasing our need for electricity and energy. So you could see that it's going up over time. So one could argue that even though we're using maybe a better light bulb, let's say the light bulb is using less energy and we don't have to and let's assume that the light bulb lasts for the same amount of time, and let's say that light bulb, when you create it, requires the same amount of energy as an incandescent light bulb, which is all very dubious, but let's say that all of that remains the same. It doesn't matter. Those light bulbs aren't really saving us anything in the long haul because we're using more electricity. So we're kind of kidding ourselves that every time we replace the light bulb we may feel better, but then we plug in the flat screen TV and the several computers in the house and plug in the cell phones and we end up using way more electricity over time. Okay, so I'd say the fictitious belief that we're saving electricity and we're having smaller impact on our environment it's quite comical, honestly, when you look at the facts. Okay, so this graph kind of highlights the fact that there's a greater need to look at human population. If you really believe that human beings are having an impact on our environment, and that impact is negative, and it's ultimately detrimental, if you accept all that, okay, which I'm not arguing with it within the confines of this video, if you accept all that, then you must be driven to entertain the concept that human population is an issue. And it's an issue when talking about the environment. Okay, so, this, of course, I was talking about Europe. I'm talking about the United States. We're talking about graph there, and someone's saying, wait a minute, population is going up greatest not in the United States or in Europe. It's going up greatest in other countries like Africa, India, and other places which don't have such a need for electricity, transportation, and they don't use as much energy. And there's, something to be said for that. But there's another graph that we could take a look at. So, and that's partially true. You could see that more developed countries may be increasing in population, but not as much as the less developed countries. And just because the less developed countries are increasing with population, that doesn't mean that there's this great use or impact on the environment, because these people in smaller, less developed countries don't use as much energy. So we really shouldn't worry that much. Well, I just showed you a graph that if developed countries are increasing with population, they themselves are using more energy. So even if their population remains even, it's not. In parts of Europe it is going down, but it's still a factor because we're using more energy. And all these people in these less developed areas eventually will start to, if we follow their progress along technology, they're going to go into the coal production. They're going to travel through the states of technology just like people did in Europe and the United States. They have to go through those stages of growth, and they will they will burn fossil fuels, and eventually these people will make a gigantic impact on the environment because they're going to travel through. They're not going to hop over use of coal and other plant-based. You don't just jump into advanced world technology. You have to travel through them slowly and accept the technology over time. No one leapfrogs over it. So these people I would not discount when it comes to their impact on the environment. Maybe not now, maybe not 10 years, or maybe not even 100 years from now, but these people will make an impact on the environment in a considerable way when their technology starts to advance and they start to use other primitive forms of technology that make a gigantic impact on their environment. Okay, we're going to go to our last part where we're going to talk about stages of human population. I talked about stages of technology and how we all progress through that. We all do progress through technology, and eventually our technology gets better. Same thing happens for human population. There is this graph. It's a beautiful graph. Hard to understand at first, but it really does bring to light what happens with human population over time. So what you need to look at is there's two different graphs within this graph, within the greater graph. There is the top line here that talks about birth rate, and then there's this bottom line here that talks about the death rate. Of course, we have time here in the bottom, and we have just amount of births, death rate combo on the side. So this is how many people there are, so to speak, on the y-axis here. Okay, well, what does it mean? Well, in stage one, in very primitive societies, we have a high birth rate, but unfortunately there's a high death rate. So a lot of births, but a lot of deaths, because medical advancements are low, but yet people are having lots of children. Maybe they're dying at childbirth. Maybe they're just living to a very short amount of years. People are dying, So there may be very low population here, and it actually turns out that there's a lot of young people in these kind of stages. There's a lot of young people in stage one societies, but not many old people, because they're dying off. Okay, all right, let's move to stage two. So now stage two, we still have a high birth rate. See that? There's a high number. This is just a number here. A high number of births. But now we can see that the death rate is starting to go down. So in other words, we're becoming smarter. Our medicine is better. We're living longer. We take precautions. Maybe we used animals more than people. We wash our hands. We understand things more about medicine that are allowing us to stay alive longer. Okay, so the larger the difference between birth and death, when there's a high birth and a low death, population increases. So in stage two, population is going up because there's a huge difference between birth and death rates. So that means population will increase. Inevitably, you have a high population society when you have stage two. Okay, so that brings us to stage three. Let's talk about stage three. Stage three, let's see, the death rate is now leveling off. So we're pretty much maximizing our role of science, and we're doing everything we can to keep people alive longer, less deaths at birth. So science is finding a maximum there. We're starting to level out. People aren't dying as much. And now the birth rates are going down. So people say, we just don't have, there's no need to be in this, let's create 12 kids to plow the fields, because we mechanize that process. And now we have machines that do that. So there's no need to have a large number of people. So we lower the number of people, lower the size of families. So we're having less children. So we're having less children, but people are dying less. So that means population will start to remain a constant. And that's what's going to happen. And that's where we move into stage four, where we finally are finding a balance between the birth and death cycle, so that societies level off. They don't grow, they don't decay, they stay at a steady state. So there is a constant. So that means you won't have that skyrocketing population growth. So the United States is somewhere in stage three. You have other primitive societies that are probably early stage two, like in Africa. They have a high birth rate, and they still have a high death rate. So not good, So when you're talking about primitive societies, underdeveloped societies, we're talking stage 2. But as we help them move into stage 3, we hopefully can then help ourselves along with them move into the end of stage 3 and enter into stage 4, which is a constant. So if human population remains constant and it doesn't grow, then every time we do make an advancement in technology that allows us to make less of an environmental impact, then we truly are making gains. Not this perception of a gain which is a pipe dream. We're actually making real gain. We're lowering our impact on society. So we call this stage 2 is colonization, where you just breed like crazy. You're breeding and breeding, and population is going out of control. It's unsustainable. Mathematically unsustainable. I'm not talking about climate change and arguing about that. I'm saying that there's a finite resource called the Earth. It's finite. We all admit that there's only a finite amount of space, and if you continue human growth, human increase in our numbers, if it keeps going, unbridled growth, exponential growth, eventually you're going to have a cataclysmic problem. And I think we're smart enough to foresee it. We're going to lower the birth rate, keep a nice scientific advancement to lower the death rate, keep that nice and low, and then we'll have a constant human population, and then we'll find other ways to lessen our impact on the environment. Okay, I have to say also that I'm not talking about mandatory population requirements like China. I'm just talking about, this is public service announcement, and just trying to enlighten people. I'm not going to mandate anything along those lines. This is just educating the public. I wouldn't no longer, not only would I say that we need freedom of speech and other freedoms, we have the freedom to have as many kids as we want, but keeping in mind we're intelligent species, we also have to foresee how to solve a problem, which means if we're smart enough, we're going to have less kids and cause less of a problem overall as a human population to our planet. Okay, so I'm hoping that this clarifies everything, and there will be no need to come up with a new video to explain any other facet of this conversation. Okay, so once again, my name is Mark Karadimos, and hopefully this does the job of explaining what I think, how we should approach human population within the greater context of climate change and just impact on our environment. Okay, take care and have a great day.